Let's get going. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good noon. We're going to be talking a little bit about the buzzword of the year, Copilot or AI, but also about the security risks that come with it and how you can tackle those. For the people who don't know me, I'm Tim Hermy. I'm a technical specialist at Microsoft Belgium. I'm at Microsoft now almost 2 years. Before I joined, I was a freelance, focused on identity, endpoint management, and security. And then they asked me from Microsoft to join as a cloud endpoint AS, but in the end, I rolled into the compliance part, the dark side of the security stack. But it was a wonderful journey for me. I was also a Microsoft MVP Enterprise Mobility, certified trainer. The people who know MC2MC, I'm running a user group also with a lot of technical colleagues of me. Something personal, I play drums or try to play drums. I'm on holiday a lot. The people who follow me know that. I'm working from holiday to holiday mostly. I discovered volcanoes a few years ago, and I can recommend it. Go visit a volcano, and I'm a foodie. With me today, I have our incredible expertise partner, Lighthouse, with us, and I'm going to give the word to James.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So I'm James Hart. I'm a director in the advisory team here at Lighthouse. Lighthouse is a. I think we may need to separate a little bit because the feedback. There we go. That's better. So Lighthouse is a partner with Microsoft. We've been working with them for many years, and I'll show you some of the details of that shortly. A little bit about me. I've been working with legal teams, primarily in e-discovery and incident response, so background in computer forensics. Been doing that kind of for about 15 years. And the last 4 or 5 years, I've been dedicated to working with Microsoft and the M365 stack, and specifically within Purview, or the Security Compliance Center as it used to be called. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. A little bit about Lighthouse here. So our actual relationship with Microsoft has gone back 25 years. We're the e-discovery partner for Microsoft. We've been working specifically in Purview now or security and compliance now for coming up to 10 years with Microsoft in various different areas of that. Some details of the engagements, the teams that we have. I personally oversee the European operations, so any of the projects that we're doing in Europe will ultimately be looked after by me. We're a preferred partner when it comes to security. We're on the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association. We're a preferred partner for Content AI as well. And we've got a number of awards, including in the top right, for the second time, but not consecutive years, for Trailblazer for compliance and security as well. So I'll hand it back over. Thank you.
All right, let's start with the nice, interesting statistics. As you can see on the graph, it took 16 years to reach 100 million users using a mobile phone or a smartphone. And if you look at the other side, it took only 2 months to get to that same threshold of users using AI or generative AI. But it also makes clear that AI is really a hot topic. People are using it a lot, and it's normal. It unleashes creativity. It unleashes your productivity. You can use it to up-level your skills. If you're a developer, you can use it to write code, fine-tune the code. It can help you a lot with your work. But of course, with AI, there are associated risks. Something that we should be aware of. We have lack of controls. A lot of organizations find that they have a lack of controls to protect the data that they share in AI, or a lack of controls to govern the data. How can we govern it? And of course, we also have the increased regulatory pressure with the legislations that are coming. We have to keep strict knowledge of what we are doing with our AI and what we let our end users do to comply on certain legislations. Some examples for security concerns, and I think these are examples that you will find logical. Data leak, you don't want your end users to put sensitive data in AI. And like when you allow Copilot in your work, you can allow your end users to use it, but you don't want your sensitive data to go in a third-party AI, for example. And we at Microsoft have Purview. We can help you with that. And James will be talking that a little bit later. But also data oversharing. In the end, there's a simple rule in Copilot. If the end user has access to a certain file, Copilot will bring that file up, no matter where it is. So data oversharing, it will bring up a lot of problems or issues, or let's say better risks, of data that is publicly too open available. Let's say that you don't have the proper controls in place at the SharePoint site for HR, and an employee is asking, hey, how much is my colleague making? It can put that data up. So you need to have proper boundaries and protect it. Non-compliant usage of AI to create propaganda or fake files, it's also possible. But we're going to be focusing on the two first pillars a little bit today. At Microsoft, we of course have a shared responsibility. So we stand for ethical AI. The one thing that you should know that is that we are not using your data to train our models. Your data is your data, and we are not touching your data. I think that's the most important message from the Microsoft side. But also as an organization, you have some responsibilities. You can let your end users work with AI, let them have access to AI, but you also have to protect and govern your AI. If you just let it run loose in your organization, maybe it will show a little bit too much information or sensitive information to some people who don't want to see that or who don't need to see that. And that's where Purview comes in. Purview is a brand name with everything compliance and data security related. Structured data-wise, unstructured data-wise, we go across IaaS, SaaS, you can plug in SaaS applications, and on-prem and multi-cloud. This is the whole stack of Microsoft Purview. We're going to dive a little bit deeper, or James will dive a little bit deeper in some of the topics. If you look at the Purview stack, the structured data, the unstructured data part, you can see that we have a lot of pillars here. Information protection, data loss prevention, insider risk management, communication compliance. James will tackle all those. Data lifecycle management. Do know we have a solution for almost everything. A quick round, compliance manager on the top. I'm going to keep it really high level here. It's sort of a project management tool that you can use to see how compliant you are to certain regulations. Let's say you want to implement NIS2, you can use Compliance Manager as a project manager tool. Information protection is all about identifying sensitive information and then protecting it, classifying it with labels, putting encryption on there. It's the first layer of protection. Data loss prevention, where can my sensitive data go to? Or better said, where can it not go to? You don't want it to third-party AI, but also think about shadow IT. Do you want your sensitive information on a personal Dropbox? Rather not. Data lifecycle management, records management is how long you want to retain data. And some data has some legal obligations to be retained. Think about HR data, financial data. You could use these two products to automate that, to archive it after a certain amount of time, to delete it. Inside the risk management, data exfiltration can happen. It's a sort of monitoring tool. Communication compliance, I also always use the example here. The banking industry is using this a lot to check how compliant their end users are sending data over Teams, if they are sending bank account numbers. And also another interesting example here are schools. Schools were reluctant to use Teams in the beginning. You can also use communication compliance to monitor harassment and bullying, for example. E-discovery and audit, I'm going to leave those to James to tackle. Priva is our privacy management tool, and we also have the integration with structured data. So once you have your information protection scheme, your labels in place, you can link them to the structured data too, to databases on-prem and in the cloud. The most fun part, I'm going to be talking about it a little bit later too. This is now in public preview since 2 weeks ago, and this should be an enabler for organizations to tackle some of the issues that AI can bring up. Just a glimpse of it. I will talk a little bit about it later.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to run through some of the ways that you can actually use that technology to support your deployment of AI. And the first thing I wanted to show was really the architecture here. And the key thing, if you can see up there in the top left, that grounding area, whenever a user puts a prompt into the system, it's not going to go out and generate the response based on all of the data that's out there. It goes through a process that's regarded as grounding. And that's really making sure that that user is only going to get a response based on the data that user has access to and is authorized to look at. So that's the first stage. It's going to go through and it's going to strip out that and make sure that it's limited in that way. It's going to go through the complicated process of starting to collate all that information and then really kind of start to feed that back. All the while, that information is being parsed through the compliance and security tools in Purview. So you'll see that there's some like capture of the prompts that you're putting into the system, so you can see them later on from an investigations perspective. You'll see what documents have been used, and all of those sorts of things. There's also an element in there that it'll actually understand the context of the documents that it's taken the data from. One good example is that if you've got an information protection labeling schema and you've got public documents that anybody can access, you've got private documents that only certain teams can access, whenever any of those documents are referenced in the response from the AI, it's going to take the highest regarded label. So in that instance, if it's taking that private and it's taking that public data and it's returning that back to you in the prompt, it's going to say, well, I've taken this from a private document labeled as private, so therefore the document I'm going to create is going to be labeled private. And it will maintain that for you as well, so you can track that through. So there are processes as soon as you put that prompt in that's going to start to track and make sure the response is actually appropriate. We talked about some of the risks there around sensitive data exposure and things like that, proprietary information, that type of thing. A big one for me that doesn't really come up very often is that biases and errors. For me, you have to have a good set of data for the system to be trained and to be aware of. Now, over time, if you're not clearing up old legacy documents, you've done a mass migration, everybody's got access to old archives, policy documents that are now outdated, when you ask the AI the question, when you ask Copilot that question, the response you're going to get is based on old information. So that response may actually be less accurate and cause problems for you. It could be biased, it could have errors. So you need to have a process in there to kind of clear up that data and make sure that it's restricted. Unauthorized access, obviously you don't want to be able to access your boss's HR records or employment details, that type of thing. They're the obvious ones. So just making sure that we have those. And then the final one there is compliance challenges. How do we track, how do we maintain, how do we make sure that people are using the systems appropriately? All of this can be done through the Purview stack. I would say that actually a lot of the information here is not actually new. The technology is not specifically designed for Copilot. It's been out for some time. There are tweaks and improvements that are coming in to improve the way that Copilot can interact with them, but all of the controls are there today that you can actually go and deploy. So you can see here some of them that are actually already there. And I'm going to dig into a lot of these elements shortly. Okay, so where to begin? Well, we need to understand our data. We need to therefore look at what we're going to do with that data, how we're going to protect that data, how we're going to manage that data. That comes into preventing data loss, and I'll come into that into a little bit more, and how to govern that data. Those are the four kind of core elements that we want to make sure that we're looking at. The way that we approach this is we use the information governance reference model here. You may be familiar with this, you may have seen it, but this really just allows us to make sure that we're tracking who the stakeholders are, that we're involving all parts of the business in this process. If we're not doing that, we run the risk of skipping a team, skipping some requirements, and it causing us an issue later on. So, making sure the business is happy. I'm just going to run through these security, privacy, risk, legal. All of those teams need to be involved in that process because they're all going to have inputs that will be meaningful to them, and it's going to be important that you actually pull that in. It's extremely important that we pull that into what we call a steering committee. So you bring a collective of them together, records managers or specific members of specific teams, specific stakeholders, so you can have that conversation with them. How do you want to use the data? What are the risks from a privacy perspective? From a legal perspective, what do we need to consider? And then you can start to map out and understand how you're going to start to deploy the technology. For me, the big point here is that that information governance steering committee is going to drive the policy that you're going to be putting out there. And policy gets used a lot, especially within the Microsoft technology. So policy here, I'm talking about the decisions that you make as a business in how you're going to manage the data, the policies that you're creating around that data. You will see policies come up in kind of like data loss prevention policies and things like that. That's more of the technology implementation. But here we're going to talk about the kind of logic behind that. And then the process, what we'll actually expect to manage in that information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to map that out for you and map out some of that process. I've tried to squeeze as much information in the 30 minutes that we have, so I'm going to run through it quite quickly. As I mentioned, policy is key. So these are the policies that we want to use. We want to drive our classification, data loss prevention, audit, and insider risk here. And that policy is going to drive all of that, so we need to make sure that we're solid on that. So let's have a look at the first instance. So here we're going to look at classification. And here's where your classification is really looking at the types of documents you have. Is it traditional records that you need to make sure you're maintaining? Are they documents that contain HR records, CVs, resumes, business documentation, that type of thing? We can use that taxonomy to decide what we want to do with that data. You've got 100 documents in a folder. We need to start breaking them down to what are they? How do we want to deal with them? Once we've started to identify that taxonomy, we can then decide what we want to do. So the tools that we have in Purview are the ability to use information protection, labeling on those documents, making sure that it's stored in the right place and using protection on those documents, but also governing that data as well. So how do we do that? There's a couple of different ways that we can use data classification to identify the data types. Some of them are as basic as using exact data match, where you can have a database list of customer accounts. And you can say, well, use this customer account list. If there's a document and it contains one of these, we're going to call it customer accounts. Then we can deal with that a way that we want to deal with that. Or it might be that you have a sensitive information types, things like credit cards and debit cards, fantastic for this, because we're looking for that 16 or 18 digit code. It's a specific format. We're going to see it in a document that says, account number or like expiry date and things like that. And it will use that information in conjunction with each other to actually identify that type of data, regardless of whether it's in a particular document or email or in a Teams message. It's going to find that data. And the last one there is trainable classifiers, where it's actually going to, this is, I'm going to say, like the early integration of machine learning and AI into Purview, where it's actually going to go through a training model where you can give it sample documents and say, here's an example set of documents that look like CVs or HR policy records, and it's going to learn what those look like and know what they look like in the future as they pop up as well. So once we've identified those, it's then about labeling and information protection and labeling from Microsoft and Purview. You can go ahead and you can label individual documents. That label is going to travel with that document. So if you've got that document stored in SharePoint and you label it, you then email that document, it's going to come with that label and it's going to track with that label. So it's very important that stays with that document. Some of the capabilities around the actual labeling, things like encryption. So you can have basic encryption to keep it within your organization, right the way through to using things like double key encryption, which is a higher level of encryption than the standard versions, but it also means that additional controls can't access that data. Actually, Copilot can't access that data. So if there's a document or set of documents that you want to restrict people from accessing, even the Copilot, you can actually go in there and you can label it using double key encryption, or you can label it using specific user level permissions. You can say these 5 people can access it, but it's not going to be able to read it. Copilot's not going to be able to see that data. And auto-labeling. Auto-labeling is going to be key. If you're doing that classification, you've got that taxonomy that says these types of documents are going to have this label. You can put that in as a policy on the labels, and it's going to actually find those documents for you and automatically label them. So you can roll that out very quickly across your organization to protect that information. Just a quick example here. So here we've got a document that's set as highly confidential and it's encrypted. We've got a bunch of users that are actually working on a public SharePoint site, and they've copied that document in there. They're actually using custom permissions on the user level. Once that's in that SharePoint site, everybody in the business can access it, but actually when the users try and open up that document, it's going to say, no, you're not authorized to use this. So there's that added layer of security there. So that's going to protect that information and protect it from Copilot as well. Everybody who has access to that site can see that document, but can't access the content. That includes Copilot. Any of those users aren't going to be able to pull that information out. When it comes to actually, what I said a moment ago is that when you start to use that information, if you're using that highly confidential document and you have permissions to access it, as soon as you're generating a new draft with Copilot and it's using that base document, it's actually going to apply the same level of protection. So it's going to carry through that same protection to that. I mentioned data lifecycle management. There's a couple of examples here of how you could do that. There's different ways with things like retention policies that are across the entire workload. So you can say for Exchange, we want to keep everything for a year. After a year, we'll just let people delete the stuff that they want to delete. Or you can say, actually, no, go ahead and delete that data. So a couple of examples there. You can apply separate labels as well. So there's retention labels that you can apply to documents that you want to keep for longer. And again, you can set expiry dates on those. I'm going to jump forward because I'm just aware of time. So here we're talking about, for data loss prevention, around the sensitivity of those documents and where we actually want to store data. So that's the protection rules that we want to apply. So here, one of the key things is that you can actually prevent data from being stored in specific locations. So if you know it contains a type of information, for example, that highly confidential document before, you can actually say, no, you can't put it in that public site. You can put restrictions on that level. Couple of examples just here, looking through how we're protecting that information, so stop it being shared between different users and different teams. We can put barriers between different business units. So if your HR department is trying to share information with other organizations, other teams, you can put barriers in to stop that. You can stop people from uploading it to certain endpoints or through cloud applications and things like that as well to protect that information. A couple of examples here as well. If users are putting data into those locations, you can actually decide what rules you want to apply to that, whether it's block it, whether it's encrypt it, whether it's just alert teams. There's different processes that you can pull into that. So moving on to some of the audit piece, that's where we start to track the actual events. What are people doing with the data? How do we want to start to track that information? Again, policies driving those event definitions of what we actually want to track, what we want to govern and how we want to see that data. And this is where we start to see governance coming into that. How are people using that? What do we see as the way that they're tracking and using that information? You'll see things like that in the AI hub and through the audit and things like that. Violations as well. That's where we start to use communications compliance to actually do that. And this is kind of the first quick win. Communications compliance, if you're worried about the use of AI, communications compliance, enable it, set up some policies just to see what people are putting into the prompts, see if they're using sensitive information that you can define, so you can use those same policy definitions that we said earlier. So you can say, if somebody's sharing a credit card detail in Teams, let me know, and you'll actually see that come through in communications compliance. It's not going to block it, it's not going to be intrusive for any of the users, but it's going to allow you to start seeing the behaviors and the usage within your organization. And then you can inform decisions off that through your steering committees, conversations that you can have with the groups. Okay. The final piece here is then using that for insider risk. So starting to build that into what are the user behaviors? Are we seeing stuff that we're not happy with, not expecting, stuff that people shouldn't be doing? You can start to define those, and you can indicate those based on a risk profile as well. So you can build things in from third-party connectors to say, well, this employee has just resigned, they're looking to leave. That changes their risk profile if they start to access lots of documents. So those indicators change, and the way that we're tracking that type of behavior can change as well. So the tools there are around triage, investigation, and actually action there, so blocking and things like that. Premium e-discovery, this is kind of your second quick win. If you've got premium e-discovery, you can go in, you can search for the prompts. All of the prompts through Copilot are tracked, they're stored, they're discoverable. The users can't necessarily access them, but you as a head in the governance team, you can actually go in and do searches for these and see what people are actually putting into the prompts as well. So you can use a combination of communications compliance and e-discovery to look at what the behaviors of those users are. And start to understand what's happening. And if somebody's being, aggressive or trying to get into various different documents using Copilot, then you can actually see that through the prompts here as well. Okay, and I've just exploded that just to have that on the page there. There is an element you'll hear privacy risk management and PRIVA coming up. This is really an amalgamation of some of those technologies. So in the core, those technologies work the way that they've been designed, but to give privacy managers, risk managers, actual access to some of those tools, there is the PRIVA suite of tools, so you can actually go in there and customize some of the workflows specifically for data privacy in mind. So, data minimization, making sure that information is stored where it should be, that it's tracked and deleted when it should be deleted, that type of thing. But also look for internal transfers as well. All of this works with Copilot, so it's going to see where that data is flowing across your organization, so you can start to understand what's happening, specifically from a privacy aspect there. I'm going to hand it back in a second to Susan. Go ahead.
Yes, AI Hub. AI Hub has been in private preview for a really long time. A lot of big customers enrolled in it. And it will really give you insights in your AI usage in your organization. Not only talking about Copilot, but also talking about third-party AI. And if you have, like James already said, you have your sensitivity labels, you have your sensitive information types, it will also show what your end users are putting in those third-party AI, if they are putting sensitive information types in there. You can use this as a driver, of course, also to accelerate your data loss prevention program and to make your data loss prevention policies to block third-party AI. So it's really a tool that can be an enabler. Licensing-wise, there is nothing known yet, so that will still follow in the coming months.
Fantastic. Okay, and I wanted to leave everybody with some quick wins. So there's two quick wins that are out there. They're both actually available through Microsoft and through Lighthouse. The first one is a data security check. This is really a way for us to come in and support you looking at deploying these technologies. So we look at some of the ways that your organization and the data is set up today, and then we'll work with you on ways that you can implement that based on your policies, the way that your teams want to deploy that data. Just go back for a second. Just jumping forward. So that's something that you can get. Just come talk to us on the stand, and we can walk you through that process. The other thing is actually a readiness assessment. If you know that you're going all in with Copilot, we have a pre-baked readiness assessment. It actually just won an award from Microsoft for the assessment. And this is really, again, allowing us to come in and work with you to understand what you're doing as an organization and how we can manage that. Finally, just thank you for everybody.
Yep. For more questions, or if you want to talk more about the product, if you want to see some slides or demos about AI Hub, come talk with us at our booth. And I'm going to end with a quote of my favorite superhero, his uncle. With great power comes great responsibility. So I think for AI, it's pretty much the same. You have to control it, govern it, and protect it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.